Part 1. The long silence. The sky above Earth burned orange and red as the Velthari warships descended through the atmosphere. Commander Daniel Shaw stood on the bridge of the colony vessel Endurance and watched his homeworld die. He had been a soldier for 15 years. He had seen battles and death and terrible things, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Nothing could prepare any human for watching their entire civilization burn. The Velthari had come without warning. One day, humanity was celebrating its first successful journey beyond the solar system. The next day, 12 alien species united under one banner arrived at Earth with 10,000 warships. They called themselves the Velthari Dominion, and they had come to wipe humanity from existence. They called it the Purification. They said humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent to be allowed to spread among the stars. The irony was not lost on Daniel. The aliens were killing billions of innocent people because they feared human violence. Dr. Lisa Monroe worked at her console beside him. Her fingers moved across the controls with desperate speed. She was uploading the final sequences of Project Slumber into the ship's navigation systems. Project Slumber was humanity's last hope. It was a plan born from desperation and fear. 47 massive ARC ships would scatter across the galaxy, carrying 6 million humans in cryogenic sleep. They would hide in the darkest corners of space, in dead systems where no one would think to look, orbiting rogue planets and brown dwarfs at the edge of known space. And they would sleep. They would sleep for as long as it took for the galaxy to forget them. Daniel turned away from the burning Earth. He could not watch anymore. Every second he spent looking at that destruction was a second he could spend saving the people still alive on his ship. "How many made it out?" he asked Lisa. She did not look up from her work. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the grief underneath. 47 ARCs. Nearly 6 million people in cryogenic suspension. The Velthari destroyed 8 ARCs before they could jump to hyperspace. Another 3 were damaged and had to be abandoned. 6 million people. Out of 12 billion. Daniel closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe. 6 million was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. It was a chance. Admiral Catherine Cole's voice crackled through the communication system. She was aboard her flagship, the Defiance, leading what remained of Earth's defense fleet in a suicidal last stand. Her ships were buying time for the ARCs to escape. Every minute they held the line was another minute for humanity's survivors to disappear into the void. "All ARCs, this is Admiral Cole," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, the voice of a woman who had already accepted her death. "Jump coordinates are locked. Begin hyperspace sequence on my mark. Your only mission now is to survive." Daniel gripped the edge of his console. He wanted to stay and fight. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn the Endurance around and join the battle. But he knew that would be suicide. It would waste every sacrifice that Admiral Cole and her fleet were making. "Guardian," Daniel said to the ship's artificial intelligence, "confirm jump coordinates." The AI responded in a calm, feminine voice. "Jump coordinates confirmed, Commander. Destination: Brown Dwarf System designated X 7749. Located in the outer rim of the galaxy. Estimated arrival time: 4 months. Cryogenic systems are ready for crew suspension. Every Tino." Lisa finished her work and stepped back from the console. "Project Slumber is fully uploaded. The awakening protocols are set to activate when certain conditions are met. When the galaxy forgets us. When it is safe to return." "How long?" Daniel asked. Lisa shook her head. "I do not know. Centuries. Maybe longer. The AI will monitor galactic communications and wait for the right moment. It could be 1,000 years. It could be 10,000. We will sleep until the universe forgets that humanity ever existed." Admiral Cole's voice came through the speakers again. "All ARCs, jump in 30 seconds. I want you to know that I am proud of every single one of you. You carry the future of our species in your holds. You carry our children, our dreams, our hopes. Sleep well, children of Earth. When you wake, remember what they did to us. Remember the faces of the dead. Remember the burning sky. And make them remember, too, the communication cut off. On the tactical display, Daniel watched as Admiral Cole's flagship turned directly toward the Velthari command vessel. She was going to ram it. She was going to buy them the final seconds they needed. All hands, Daniel announced over the ship-wide intercom. Prepare for hyperspace jump. Report to cryogenic bays immediately after transition. This is not a drill. This is the end of our old lives and the beginning of something new. I will see you all on the other side. The Endurance's engines roared to life. Around them, 46 other ARC ships did the same. For one brief moment, the scattered remnants of humanity hung together in the darkness of space, united in their flight. Then the hyperspace drives activated, and the ARCs vanished one by one. They scattered across the galaxy like seeds blown by a terrible wind. Each ARC carried not just frozen bodies, but the entirety of human knowledge. Art and music and literature. Science and medicine and engineering. History and philosophy and law. Everything that made humanity what it was, compressed into data storage and frozen in ice. And something else. Something the Velthari had not anticipated. They carried human rage. 10,000 years of cold, patient, burning rage, waiting to be awakened. Daniel was the last crew member to enter cryogenic suspension. He stood before his pod and looked around the frozen bay. Rows upon rows of sleeping humans stretched into the darkness. Young and old, soldiers and scientists, teachers and farmers, poets and engineers. They were all that remained of a species that had once dreamed of touching the stars. He climbed into his pod and felt the cold embrace him. The last thing he saw before the ice took him was a small photograph taped to the inside of the pod's lid. His daughter, Emma, smiling in the sunlight of a world that no longer existed. I will remember, he whispered. I promise. The pod sealed. The temperature dropped. And Commander Daniel Shaw joined 6 million humans in the long silence between the stars. Behind them, Earth crumbled to ash. The Velthari celebrated their victory. They erased humanity from their records, deleted every reference to the strange and dangerous species they had destroyed. Over the centuries that followed, the memory of humanity faded. It became legend, then myth, then nothing at all. The galaxy forgot. But in the cold darkness at the edge of space, 6 million humans dreamed. They dreamed of green fields and blue oceans. They dreamed of children laughing and music playing. They dreamed of home, and they dreamed of revenge. Part 2. The Awakening. The ice cracked. Warm air hissed into the cryogenic pod. Machines hummed to life for the first time in 10,000 years, pumping heated fluid through tubes, stimulating frozen muscles, forcing dead hearts to beat again. Nathan Price opened his eyes. For a long moment, he could not move. His body felt like stone. His thoughts moved slowly, crawling through a fog of chemical sleep. The lights above him were dim, flickering with age. Something was wrong with them. Something was wrong with everything. He tried to speak, but his throat was raw and dry. A mechanical arm extended from the side of the pod and pressed a tube to his lips. Cool water flowed into his mouth, and he drank greedily. The fog in his mind began to clear. Memories returned in fragments. The burning sky, the ARC ship, his daughter's face, Emma. She had been 7 years old when he kissed her goodbye and stepped into this pod. She had been crying, but trying to be brave. He had promised her that when he woke up, they would build a new home together. A better home. Status report, he croaked. The ship's AI responded immediately. The voice was feminine and calm, unchanged by the passage of time. Good morning, Nathan Price. Awakening protocols successful. All vital signs are within normal parameters. You may experience temporary muscle weakness, nausea, and disorientation. These symptoms should fade within the next few hours. Nathan forced himself to sit up. His muscles screamed in protest. He had been 28 years old when he went to sleep. He was still 28. But his body felt ancient. "Guardian," he said, remembering the AI's name. "How long have I been asleep?" There was a pause. Nathan had the strange feeling that the AI was deciding how to deliver bad news. Current date. Galactic Standard Year. 12,847. Time elapsed since departure from Earth. 10,216 years, 4 months, and 11 days. Nathan stared at the ceiling of his pod. 10,000 years. He had known this might happen. Lisa Monroe had warned them that the sleep could last for millennia, but hearing the number spoken aloud made it real in a way that nothing else could. Everyone he had ever known was dead. Every place he had ever visited was gone. The world he had fought to save had been dust for 100 centuries. "What about Earth?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Earth no longer exists in any stellar database," Guardian replied. "All records of human civilization have been erased from galactic archives. I have monitored communications from over 400 alien species during our sleep. None of them contain any reference to humanity." Nathan laughed. It was a bitter sound, hollow and cold. "They really did it. They wiped us out so completely that no one even remembers we existed." "That is correct. However, this also means that no one is looking for us. The conditions for awakening have been met. It is safe to emerge." Nathan climbed out of his pod and stood on unsteady legs. The cryogenic bay stretched out before him, row after row of pods containing sleeping humans. Some of the pods were dark. Their occupants had not survived the long sleep. But most of the lights glowed green. Most of his people were still alive. "Begin awakening sequence for priority personnel," he ordered. "Start with the bridge crew and medical staff." Acknowledged. Estimated time to full awakening of priority personnel. 6 hours. Nathan walked slowly through the bay. Looking at the frozen faces of his fellow survivors, he recognized some of them. Friends, colleagues, people he had trained with, fought beside, laughed and cried with. They looked peaceful in their sleep. They did not yet know what had happened. They did not yet know that they had slept while the universe moved on without them. He found Emma's pod in the family section. His daughter floated in the ice, her face unchanged from the day he had last seen her. She was still 7 years old. She would always be 7 years old, and when she woke up, he would have to explain to her that everything she had ever known was gone. 6 hours later, the bridge crew assembled in the command center. Dr. Megan Hart, the chief scientist, sat at her console and studied the flood of data that Guardian had collected over the millennia. Colonel Scott Bradley, the security chief, paced back and forth like a caged animal. Dr. Victor Santos, the lead engineer, ran diagnostics on the ship's aging systems. "The Velthari Dominion is gone," Megan announced. "They collapsed about 6,000 years ago. Civil war, economic collapse, plague, the usual story. Their territory was absorbed by a dozen different factions over the following centuries." Scott stopped pacing. "So the bastards who killed us are already dead. Their civilization is dead," Megan corrected. "But their descendants are still out there. And so are the other species that supported the purification." Nathan stood at the center of the bridge, looking out at the stars through the main viewport. They were orbiting a frozen moon, circling a brown dwarf that barely qualified as a star. It was the most desolate place he had ever seen. It was perfect. "What about the other arcs?" he asked. Guardian answered, "I have established contact with 30 other arc vessels. Arc 12 was destroyed by an asteroid impact approximately 4,000 years ago. The others remain in cryogenic sleep, awaiting awakening commands. How many people? Total surviving human population across all arcs, approximately 4.2 million. Nathan nodded slowly. 4 million humans, scattered across the darkest corners of the galaxy. It was not an army. It was not even a proper civilization. But it was a start. The current dominant power in this region of space is something called the Korath hegemony, Megan continued. They control about 47,000 star systems. Their economy is based primarily on slave labor. Scott cursed under his breath. So the galaxy got worse while we were sleeping. There are other powers too. The Nexari Federation, the Trillic Consortium, various smaller empires and alliances. None of them are particularly pleasant. The Nexari conduct genetic experiments on conquered species. The Trillic strip mine inhabited worlds for resources. Nathan turned away from the viewport. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fire. 10,000 years ago, his people had been victims. They had been hunted and slaughtered by powers they could not hope to match. They had fled into the darkness and hidden like frightened animals. Never again. Wake everyone up, he ordered. All arcs, all personnel. We have work to do. Scott raised an eyebrow. What kind of work? K-10. Rogue. Quote. Nathan looked at him steadily. The galaxy forgot about humanity. It forgot what we can do. It forgot what we will do to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It forgot the sound of our voices and the weight of our fury. He walked toward the door, his steps growing stronger with each stride. The weakness was fading. The fire was returning. It is time to remind them. Part 3. First contact again. 3 years passed in the darkness between stars. The humans worked without rest. They connected the surviving arcs through a network of hidden communication relays. They established secret bases on dead moons and frozen asteroids. They salvaged technology from the ruins of 100 extinct civilizations, species that had risen and fallen while humanity slept, and they watched the galaxy that had forgotten them. What they saw made their blood boil. The Korath hegemony was an empire built on chains. Billions of beings from dozens of species lived and died as property, working in mines and factories and farms to feed the luxury of their masters. The Korath themselves were tall and thin, with gray skin and black eyes. They considered themselves the superior race, the rightful rulers of all they surveyed. They treated their slaves worse than animals. The Nexari Federation was no better. They were scientists, obsessed with the secrets of genetics. They captured members of other species and experimented on them in underground laboratories. They twisted bodies and minds in pursuit of some impossible dream of perfection. Their victims lived in constant agony, crying out for death that never came. The Trillic Consortium did not even pretend to have noble goals. They were merchants and miners, strip mining inhabited worlds for valuable resources. When they exhausted a planet, they simply moved on to the next, leaving behind wastelands of poison and ash. The native populations were left to starve. Nathan Price sat in the council chamber aboard Arc 7 and listened to the reports. Around him, the leaders of the human remnant debated their next move. Admiral Kevin Ross argued for patience. Dr. Linda Vance advocated for caution. They wanted to build their strength, develop their technology, grow their numbers until they could challenge the galaxy's powers on equal terms. We could wait for centuries, Linda said. We could become so powerful that no one would dare to stand against us. Kevin nodded in agreement. We are 4 million people scattered across dead systems. The Korath have trillions. The Nexari have weapons we cannot even imagine. If we reveal ourselves now, they will crush us. Nathan understood their fears. They were reasonable fears, logical fears, but he could not accept them. And while we hide, he said quietly, Billions suffer. Every day we remain in the shadows. Slaves die in Korath mines. Every week we spend building our strength. The Nexari torture another 1,000 innocents. Every year we wait. The Trillic destroy another world. That is not our responsibility, Linda replied. We barely survived our own extinction. We cannot save everyone. Then what are we? Nathan asked. If we hide in the darkness while the galaxy burns, what makes us different from the cowards who destroyed Earth? What makes us worthy of survival? Reezer, the debate raged for hours. They argued and shouted and threatened to walk away. But in the end, it was not words that decided the matter. It was action. Lieutenant Amy Chen was 22 years old. She had been born on Arc 14, part of the first generation of humans raised entirely in the dark between stars. She had never seen a blue sky or felt warm rain on her face. She knew Earth only from stories and recordings. But she knew what it meant to be human. She knew the stories of Admiral Catherine Cole and Commander Daniel Shaw. She knew the promise that had been made in the fire of humanity's dying world. Amy was on a routine patrol mission when she detected the Korath slave transport. The ship was massive, a brutal rectangle of gray metal moving slowly toward Korath Prime. Her scanner showed over 12,000 life signs inside, packed into cargo holds like animals. They were beings from a dozen different species, captured from their homes and bound for lives of misery. Amy should have reported the contact and waited for orders. That was protocol. That was the safe choice. Instead, she opened her communication channel and broadcast a message on every frequency. This is Lieutenant Amy Chen of the Human Remnant. The people aboard that transport are under my protection. Release them immediately, or I will take them by force. The Korath captain responded with laughter. Human? There are no humans. Humans are a myth. A story to frighten children. You are bluffing. I never bluff, Amy said. She attacked alone. Her fighter was a small craft, rebuilt from salvaged alien technology and human engineering. It should not have been a match for a Korath transport's defenses, but Amy had spent her entire life training for war. She had studied every combat technique in human history. She had memorized the weaknesses of every ship design the Korath used. The transport's shields fell in 30 seconds. Its weapons were disabled in another 20. Amy landed her fighter in the cargo bay and walked out with her rifle raised, facing 100 Korath guards. Let them go, she said calmly. Or join them. The guards attacked. Amy moved through them like water through sand. She was fast and precise, her shots finding their targets with mechanical accuracy. In 3 minutes, every guard was down. She had not killed any of them. She had simply made them unable to fight. She opened the cargo holds and looked at the beings inside. They stared at her with wide eyes, unable to understand what had happened. A creature that looked like a walking tree spoke first, its voice trembling with hope and fear. What are you? Amy smiled. I am human. And you are free. The Korath hegemony responded with fury. They sent 15 warships to intercept the transport and destroy the creature that had dared to challenge their authority. They expected an easy victory. They did not find one. Amy broadcast another message as the warships approached. This is Lieutenant Amy Chen to all human vessels in range. I have 12,000 freed slaves and 15 hostile warships incoming. I could use some help. Admiral Kevin Ross received the message aboard Arc 7. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath. The young pilot had forced their hand. She had revealed humanity to the galaxy and started a war they were not ready to fight. But she had also done something else. She had reminded him why they had survived, why they had slept for 10,000 years in the cold, why they had kept the fire burning in their hearts across 100 centuries. All ships, he ordered. Move to support Lieutenant Chen. Weapons free. Show them what humans can do. 7 human vessels emerged from hiding and engaged the Korath fleet. The battle lasted 9 minutes. When it was over, 15 Korath warships drifted dead in space, and humanity had announced its return to the galaxy. Nathan Price watched the recordings of the battle from his command chair. Beside him, Megan Hart shook her head in disbelief. "She started a war," Megan said. "No," Nathan replied. "She reminded us who we are. The war was always coming. She just made sure it would be fought on our terms." He stood up and addressed the crew. "Send a message to every Ark. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them that humanity is no longer hiding. Tell them that the galaxy will never forget us again." The message spread across the void, carried by hidden relays and encrypted signals. 4 million humans heard the news and felt the fire rekindled in their hearts. The long silence was over. Part 4. The Galaxy Remembers. The story spread faster than light itself. A single warrior from a species no one had heard of had destroyed a Korath slave transport and humiliated 15 warships. The tale passed from world to world, growing larger with each telling. Some said the human had been 10 feet tall. Others claimed she had killed 1,000 guards with her bare hands. The truth was impressive enough. But truth never stopped a good legend. The Korath hegemony searched their ancient databases and found nothing. They sent investigators to dig through 10,000 years of historical records, and the investigators returned with empty hands. Humanity had been erased so completely that not even a single reference remained. The Velthari had done their work well, but the slaves remembered. The 12,000 beings that Amy Chen had freed told their stories to anyone who would listen. They described the strange creature with soft skin and bright eyes, who had appeared from nowhere and broken their chains. They spoke of humans in hushed and reverent tones, like children speaking of heroes from old legends, and others began to remember too. Deep in the archives of dying civilizations, scholars found fragments. A reference to a species called humans in an ancient trade agreement. A mention of a world called Earth in a star chart from 10 millennia ago. A single line in a Velthari military history that spoke of the purification, the great cleansing of a dangerous species. The galaxy began to piece together the truth. Humanity had existed. Humanity had been destroyed. And somehow, against all odds, humanity had returned. Nathan Price stood before the assembled population of the human remnant. 4 million people watched through holographic broadcasts from 31 hidden locations scattered across the galaxy. They had been waiting for this moment for 10,000 years. Now, it had arrived. For 10,000 years, we slept, Nathan said. His voice was calm but carried the weight of centuries. We slept while the galaxy forgot our names, our faces, our songs. They forgot the sound of human laughter. They forgot the warmth of human compassion. They forgot the fury of human rage. He paused and looked directly into the camera. His eyes burned with quiet intensity. They forgot what we could do when we had nothing left to lose. It is time to remind them. The human remnant emerged from the shadows. They did not come as conquerors. They came as liberators. General Patricia Webb led the ground forces. She was 53 years old, born on Arc 7 during the long sleep, trained in every form of combat known to human history. She landed on Korath mining worlds with battalions of soldiers and freed the slaves held there. The Korath guards fought back with desperate fury, but they were no match for warriors who had spent 10,000 years preparing for this moment. Commander Derek Nash commanded the fleet from the bridge of the renamed vessel, Hope. He coordinated attacks across dozens of systems simultaneously, striking at Korath supply lines and communication networks. Every time the hegemony tried to mass their forces, Nash anticipated their movements and cut them apart. Dr. Victor Santos developed weapons that made the galaxy's powers tremble. He took the technology humanity had salvaged from dead civilizations and combined it with human ingenuity. The result was a fleet of warships that could outrun, outfight, and outlast anything the Korath could field. But humanity did not only bring violence. Dr. Megan Hart led teams of scientists and doctors to the worlds they liberated. They healed the sick and fed the hungry. They taught the freed slaves to read and write. They built schools and hospitals and homes. And everywhere they went, humans left behind the same message. It was carved into stone monuments and broadcast into space on every frequency. It was spoken by freed slaves and whispered by frightened Korath soldiers. It became the words that defined humanity's return to the galaxy. We are humanity. We do not forget. We do not forgive. The Korath hegemony sent armada after armada to crush the human uprising. Each armada returned broken and bleeding. The slaves they had counted on to work their factories and mines were rising up in rebellion. The trade routes they had used to move their wealth were under constant attack. The fear they had used to control their empire was turning against them. Lord Kovath, supreme ruler of the hegemony, sat in his throne room and watched the reports of defeat after defeat. He was old, nearly 300 years by the counting of his species. He had ruled for a century. He had never known failure. What are these creatures? He demanded. Where did they come from? Why can we not defeat them? His advisors had no answers. The humans were like ghosts, appearing from nowhere and vanishing before they could be caught. They seemed to know every weakness of the hegemony, every flaw in its defenses. They fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, yet they showed mercy to those who surrendered. It was the mercy that frightened Lord Kovath most of all. Creatures who killed without hesitation he could understand. Creatures who showed compassion even to their enemies were something else entirely. The Nexari Federation watched the collapse of the Korath with growing fear. They sent ambassadors to meet with the humans, hoping to negotiate a truce. The ambassadors were received politely, given comfortable quarters, and fed well. Then, Nathan Price showed them the records. He showed them the laboratories where Nexari scientists had tortured innocent beings. He showed them the mass graves where failed experiments were dumped like garbage. He showed them the children who had been twisted into monsters, and the parents who had been forced to watch. We know what you have done, Nathan said quietly. We have records going back 6,000 years. Every experiment, every victim, every scream. The Nexari ambassadors fled back to their federation with warnings of doom. The humans were coming. The humans knew everything. And the humans did not forgive. The Trillic Consortium tried a different approach. They offered money. They offered technology. They offered to join the humans as allies against the Korath and the Nexari. Their representatives arrived with cargo holds full of treasure and smiles full of false friendship. Nathan met them with empty hands and honest eyes. You have destroyed 400 inhabited worlds in the past 1,000 years. You have left billions of beings to starve in wastelands of your creation. You have taken everything and given nothing. The Trillic spokesman spread his hands in confusion. Business is business. Resources must be harvested. Progress requires sacrifice. Not anymore, Nathan replied. You will stop. You will pay for the damage you have caused, or you will be stopped. The Trillic laughed at the threat. They were merchants, not warriors. But they had vast wealth, and wealth could buy anything, including the largest mercenary fleet in the galaxy. They sent that fleet against the humans. They sent 10,000 ships crewed by the deadliest fighters money could buy. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the mercenary fleet no longer existed. The Trillic Consortium lost more wealth in those 3 days than they had earned in the previous century. Nathan Price broadcast a final warning. The galaxy is changing. Slavery ends. Experimentation ends. Exploitation ends. You can be part of the new order, or you can be buried under it. The choice is yours. Across the galaxy, beings who had lived in fear for generations looked up at the stars and saw hope. They whispered the name of humanity like a prayer. They told stories of the creatures who had slept for 10,000 years and awakened to bring justice to a cruel universe. The galaxy was beginning to remember what humanity could do. And it was only the beginning. Part 5. The Inheritance of Earth. The war lasted 12 years. 12 years of battles and sieges and desperate last stands. 12 years of liberation and rebuilding and hope. When it was finally over, the galaxy had been transformed. The Korath hegemony fell first. Lord Kovath fled his throne world as human forces approached, taking his personal guard and what remained of his treasury. He ran to the edge of known space, where the stars grew thin and the darkness grew deep. He thought he could hide there, in the void beyond civilization, where no one would find him. Nathan Price found him anyway. He brought a single ship and a handful of soldiers. He walked into Kovath's hiding place and looked at the broken ruler who had once commanded 47,000 star systems. "Your empire is gone," Nathan said. "Your slaves are free. Your armies are scattered. You have nothing left but your life." Kovath stared at him with hatred in his black eyes. "You will pay for this. Perhaps not today, perhaps not in my lifetime, but someone will make you pay. The galaxy will remember what you did here." Nathan nodded slowly. "Yes, they will remember. That is the point." He turned and walked away. He left Kovath alive, alone on a frozen rock at the edge of nowhere. It was a mercy that Kovath had never shown to anyone. It was also a message. Humanity did not kill out of revenge. They killed to protect. When the threat was ended, so was the violence. The Nexari Federation surrendered after their homeworld was blockaded. Human ships surrounded their capital planet, their weapons powered down, their hatches open. The message was clear: surrender and live, fight and die. The Nexari chose to live. Their government was dissolved. Their laboratories were shut down. Their scientists were put on trial for crimes against all living things. Some were imprisoned. Some were executed. Most were simply forbidden from ever practicing science again. The Trillic Consortium did not surrender. They simply collapsed. Their economy, built on exploitation and greed, could not function without victims to exploit. When the slaves stopped working and the resources stopped flowing, the consortium tore itself apart in a frenzy of blame and desperation. Its leaders scattered to the stars, hunted by those they had once oppressed. On the day the last Trillic outpost fell, Nathan Price stood on the observation deck of the ship Hope and watched the construction of New Terra. It was humanity's first permanent world in 10,000 years. A beautiful planet of blue oceans and green continents orbiting a young star in the heart of the galaxy. Ships from 100 species orbited the planet, bringing supplies and colonists and gifts. Megan Hart joined him at the viewport. Her hair was gray now, her face lined with years of war and worry, but her eyes still held the same spark of curiosity that had driven her to become a scientist all those years ago. "They are calling us the Awakened," she said. "Some of the younger species have started religions around us. They think we are gods who slept in the darkness and woke to save the universe." Nathan shook his head. "We are not gods. We never were. We are just humans. Stubborn, flawed, imperfect humans. Stubborn enough to survive 10,000 years in the cold. Stubborn enough to crawl back from extinction." Nathan turned to face her. "Do you think she knew, Admiral Cole, when she sent us out into the void?" Megan was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Catherine Cole, the woman who had designed Project Slumber. She thought about Daniel Shaw and Lisa Monroe and all the others who had sacrificed everything so that humanity could have a chance. "I think she hoped," Megan said finally. "And sometimes hope is enough." Below them, on the surface of New Terra, the first generation of free humans played in fields of grass and flowers. They were children who had never known fear, who had never hidden in the darkness between stars. They laughed and ran and tumbled in the warm sunlight, watched over by parents who remembered the long sleep and the Great Awakening. Amy Chen was there. No longer a young lieutenant, but a respected admiral. She sat on a hillside and watched the children play. She had become a legend, the pilot who had started a war with a single broadcast. Songs were sung about her on 1,000 worlds. Statues had been raised in her image. She found it all a bit embarrassing. "You look uncomfortable," said a voice beside her. Amy turned to see Nathan Price lowering himself onto the grass. He was old now, his hair white, and his movements slow. But his eyes were still sharp, still burning with the fire that had guided humanity through its darkest hours. "I never wanted to be famous," Amy admitted. "I just did what seemed right at the time." Nathan smiled. "That is what heroes always say. They never set out to be heroes. They simply see something wrong and cannot look away. They act when others would hesitate. They hope when others despair. Is that what we are now? Heroes? We are what we choose to be," Nathan replied. "Every day, every moment, we choose. The Korath chose cruelty. The Nexari chose knowledge without wisdom. The Trillic chose greed. We chose something different." Amy looked out at the playing children. One of them, a small boy with dark hair and bright eyes, waved at her. She waved back. "What happens now?" she asked. "The war is over. The enemies are defeated. What do we do with peace?" Nathan was quiet for a long time. He watched the sun setting over the new world, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It reminded him of something, a memory so old it felt like a dream. The sky above Earth, burning as the Velthari descended. The promise made in fire and blood. "We live," he said at last. "We build. We grow. We make mistakes and learn from them. We love and grieve and struggle and triumph. We do all the things that living beings do. And we never forget." "Forget what?" "That we almost lost everything. That we were hunted to the edge of extinction by those who feared us. That we slept for 10,000 years in the cold, waiting for a chance to return." Nathan's voice grew soft but firm. "We remember, so that we never let it happen again. Not to us, and not to anyone else." He stood slowly, his old bones protesting the movement. Amy rose to help him, and together, they walked down the hillside toward the celebration below. Beings from across the galaxy had gathered to commemorate the founding of New Terra. There was music and laughter and food from 100 worlds. Nathan stopped at the edge of the gathering and looked around. He saw humans dancing with aliens they had freed. He saw children of different species playing together without fear. He saw hope. "Admiral Cole asked us to remember," he said quietly. "To remember what they did. And make them remember too. I think we have done that." Amy nodded. "The galaxy will never forget us again. No. They will tell stories about us for 10,000 more years. They will remember the species that would not die, that slept in the darkness and woke to change everything." Nathan smiled, and for a moment, he looked like the young man who had first opened his eyes on Arc 7. Full of fire and determination. They will remember humanity. Above them, the stars came out one by one. Somewhere among them, the ruins of Earth still drifted in the void. A memorial to all that had been lost. But New Terra lived, and with it the dream of a species that had refused to surrender. 10,000 years ago, humanity had made a promise. They had kept it, and the galaxy would never forget.